First, does social learning mean that we have to kill our LCMS and then we instantaneously think about the long hours we spend to implement and launch our LMS, to link them with our HR information system, to personalize and debug the system, to teach employees how to leverage its usage, and last but not the least, how much it will cost to us. The second question is social learning really useful or is it a fad? Is it really added value for learning within the organization? And if yes, then how to engage the learners, how to integrate social pieces in my training programs, and how can we really measure it works? The third question we will answer is how will it impact the job of my learning and development teams, my experts, mentors, how will it impact in terms of design, coordination, monitoring? So we will try to answer these three questions. And a fourth one, how to convince management that social learning is worthwhile for their team and does not subvert hierarchy. Finally, how will this coexist with the social network and communities of practices within the company? That's what we'll discuss in the next 30 minutes.
Johanna, just before you move on, we had a question just before this slide, didn't we? We were going to ask people's responses to what they thought about social learning, or have you got that coming up? We just ask people to respond to this question, whether they think social learning can succeed alongside an LMS. Should we just ask what they think?
Yeah.
Okay, guys, what do you think? Can social learning succeed alongside an LMS? What do you think? Could be yes, no, you may have some more to add. Well, there's certainly some positive things. Yes, but not tracked. 70-20-10 could be useful tools, says Paul Birchall. Ideally, it should be part of the LMS. Henrietta Palmer says, yes, but you need alongside the formal. And Jack says, look, anything's possible if you want it enough. Capturing the learning and tracking seems to be a difficulty for a lot of people. And Dave asked me what I think. I believe it can. I think it's nonsense to think things are antithetical and they don't succeed together. In fact, I'm a great believer in the fact that we have to try everything rather than setting ourselves up in polar position. What I think is important. What's important is what you guys think, and of course, the voice of experience, Johanna Sadoudi, who's actually done it. So let me pass back to the person who actually knows rather than waffling on. Johanna, back to you.
Okay, thank you, Don. So let's start first defining what social learning is, because I think it's really important to make sure we are all on the same page regarding concepts. I'm sure you can all remember a lot of discussions on blended learning, for example, where nobody was speaking about the same thing. So I will try to give you my definition of social learning, of what it is and what it's not. So to my opinion, first, social learning is about collaboration and sharing. It's learning with and from others. It's not new. It happens at conferences, cafes, or online. And collaborative learning is based on the model that knowledge can be created within a population where members actively interact by sharing experiences. And social learning can be either self-learning, learning from others. For example, when you read an article on Wikipedia, generally you are alone, but you benefit from the knowledge of several contributors. Or it can be also collaborative learning, learning with others. So in fact, social learning is a kind of crowd learning or learner-generated content. In both cases, it leverages collective intelligence, has people engage in this social learning process, capitalize on one another's resources and skills. Now let's have a look on what social learning is not. First, social learning is not new, as you imagine. It has been going on for a long time. And social learning has actually been happening without technology for many centuries. What's different today is that social learning is leveraging social media tools that allow for easy conversation and collaboration. So concretely, social media means the capacity for the learner to rate, to tag, to comment, to share, to contribute and modify. Key actions for learner on Web 2.0 are then deliver content and participate in a website, post a blog, evaluate a project, contribute to a wiki, deliver a video on a video channel, post pictures, things like that. This also means for them the capacity to vote on various contents, like the like button on Facebook. They are also able to associate keywords to learning content and to comment on learning content, give their opinion, and exchange with other users. For example, I can remember that in L'Oréal USA, we implemented a wiki called L'Oréalpedia, and the objective was for newcomers to benefit from the experience sharing from others, to decode the L'Oréal culture and abbreviations. So this was, for us, social learning. Social learning is, of course, not a gadget. It has a real added value for learning, and we will see of what kind in a few minutes. It's not replacing formal learning, and it's not exclusively informal. It can be, of course, included in many different ways as part of formal educational programs. So for me, it's very important to make this difference. It can be informal or formal. And, of course, social learning is not e-learning. This is not the same thing at all. So as a recap of what is social learning, I would like to focus on social learning in two main camps: formal social learning, or what we could call social training, and informal social learning that we could also call social workplace learning. So social learning occurs as social training in the form of job instruction, on-the-job training, or personal development in workshops, seminars, or classes. So it's embedded, in fact, into the training program. It is usually tracked, managed, and monitored to facilitate maximum learning. Social learning also occurs as social workplace learning in the form of sharing, connecting, and collaborating, but not because an instructor has encouraged the learner to do so, but in a self-directed, self-managed, and autonomous way. So to illustrate that, this is the wiki, the L'Oréalpedia example I was giving to you a few minutes ago. This is a kind of social workplace learning that you can implement within companies. So whereas social training is meant to build competency, social workforce learning is about job enhancement. So both are social learning, but just of different nature. So now the big question is, now that we have the same definition of social learning, the key question is, could the LMS and social learning clash? I think it's neither all black nor all white, and there is a need to balance. There is a need to balance and a need to play complementarity. If we think about the history of the World Wide Web, Facebook has not killed websites yet, but websites have embedded social application into their web pages. So this is a kind of the same thing for LMS and social learning. We have to situate ourselves in an and approach rather than an or approach. The LCMS still remains a very solid basis for courses and resources, for validation of curricula within the HRIS, and to provide also, of course, shareholders with figures on our annual reports. Social learning is more about collaboration, it's more discursive. So if I can recap like that, is that LCMS is about push learning and social components are more about pull learning. So in fact, again, this is about complementarity, because companies will still need to create, to deliver and manage and report on training initiatives. physical classroom, virtual classroom, web-based training will all still be appropriate vehicles for content delivery. To move toward a social learning model, one strategy is to socialize the formal learning that happens through courseware, curriculum, and certifications by embedding social learning inside formal content or wrapping social media around formal content. So, as I've said before, these are complementary tools. You can socialize your LMS. Formal and learner-generated content are integrated. Social functionality is integrated throughout the LMS. You can also, of course, use some tools on the market if you don't have an LMS with social components. But you have to be really careful on the transparency for the user, on the easiness for them to appropriate different tools, and also for your L&D teams, because you probably have lived that with blended learning. This was a major change in their role. They have to become competent in IT, and with social learning, I lived that in my previous jobs. You are adding some complexity into that job, so you have to be really careful not multiplying the tools that you are using, because at the end this is a nightmare for everyone to understand and also to monitor. So you can have an LMS also with social functionalities, and we can imagine that learners can rate, recommend, share courses and resources. And we can think about the way learners can co-create the courses. We can imagine how their posts and questions on the forum are gold pieces for detecting which skills are required for the organization, and also anticipating the creation of future training program or for completing some courses. I can remember a training that we did while I was working in Total Oil Company, and in fact the tutor of this session was having a look on each learning blog to complete, in fact, his courses and improve it for the next session each time, to complete the frequently asked questions document. So this is a real good sources of inputs to improve our programs. But it's also a forward-thinking tool for HR, a means to naturally promote and evaluate our learning contents in complement, of course, of communication from the L&D teams or from managers. Now, learners can also tell what they like, share with colleagues, and give you some very precious feedback, more qualitative, of course, than the Kirkpatrick questionnaire with "I totally agree" or I don't agree entirely. So this is a very powerful means for us to improve our content and our policy. Of course, right now, I think we probably have 90% of LMS functionalities and 10% of social components. I'm personally convinced that in 3 years' time, it will be the reverse, that we will have 10% of LMS functionalities and 90% of social components, and that probably the learning platform of the future will be Facebook-like more than Google-like. In fact, to me, the key question we have to ask ourselves, because the L&D function is not alone within the company, is how to make sure all that works with the social network of the company. Shall we abandon our learning management system, even socialized, to only use the social network that is generally managed by internal communication or IT teams? I have personally lived that situation, and at the beginning, it is a dream, you know, we can mutualize everything, the input, the knowledge of the employee, and the cost. The real question is that good for learners? Is that good for us? Will they understand the difference? Is the social network of the company the right tool to deliver training programs? And if we keep two different systems, what will we do in each of it? Where shall the subject matter experts be identified, for example? Where shall the catalog of skills and competencies be hosted? So I think the answer lies in the bridges between both systems, because these tools are used differently because the objectives are different. So that's why I mentioned in the slides learning resources or program for the social LMS. This is the kind of Amazon approach, meaning organizing social learning around resources or program, while social network of the company, of your company, is more about practices, communities of practices, and a catalog of competencies with the experts directory. So I lived that in my last job, and we kept the two systems because one other reason was the volume of content and spaces required by the L&D teams. And in fact, communication teams was afraid to open their social network for learning purposes, even if we are in the age of the cloud. So basically, at the end, the question is how to integrate those two systems to make it fluid for the employee, but also for the people that manage the systems. How to make sure our employees will naturally know where to find the information and will quickly retrieve it. So for me, this is the key question we have to answer, and that will be a real issue in the coming months. So looking at that complex question, we can ask ourselves, shall we persist in integrating social learning? And of course, I would say yes. The first reason why collaborative learning is worth embedding into workplace learning is because social tools are there and you can't miss them. More and more individuals start using social tools for their personal brands and professional lives, and more employees expect workplace training to incorporate the tools they use on a regular basis. That eases the use of it and the integration of knowledge, focusing on the content and not on how does this tool work, because I'm sure you all did that, but spending a lot of time explaining to people how to use the tools. And moreover, the generation C for connected is composed of people born from 1984 to 1996. And one characteristic of this generation is that social networks are at the center of their lives. For Gen Z people, social tools and platforms are the best way to communicate, to collaborate, and to create. So I was also recently reading on Brendan Hall's blog that the learning style of these people is self-paced and highly collaborative. They want to explore information on their own and then share with peers. So you need to go with the flow. Of course, you will say probably that we are talking about innovative solutions for which we have no data yet to measure effectiveness because it's too early. But this is the paradox. This is not possible to miss this fundamental shift that the development of social tools represent. So you have to go with the flow. The second reason why it's worth embedding into workplace is because it's good for your L&D teams. To me, it's a means to answer the actual challenge of the L&D function, that is to accelerate time to competency in a fast-changing environment and with less and less budget. So how could we realistically answer the expectations of our environment and of our business partners without reducing overall learning development timelines? So thanks to social learning, I think you can gain a lot of time to source, to produce, and deliver content. And you can deliver more relevant contents, more relevant events, and more relevant learning programs. I can remember a training also in which we asked participants what they would need, in fact, in the future as learning programs, and to co-create some resources, because it's easy with these tools to identify some experts, some domains of knowledge that people could share and help you co-creating the course, rather than in an expert top-down approach saying, I know everything. So this is an answer to the actual challenge of the L&D function. But it also helps, this is a challenge for them, but it also helps L&D people to be closer to what employees really need, to listen to them, to get their feedback, to improve response time, and to go directly to their internal consumer. Of course, this does not stop the communication with managers and with the strategic issues for the company, but it's really a powerful way to communicate directly with the employees, with the internal customers. It can also help identify hidden subject matter experts within the organization. That's why I was speaking about the example of the training with the people that help us co-create the resources. They were not identified as subject matter experts, and in fact they were. So this is a good mean. And at the end, it improves L&D brand recognition through the voice of the employee and word of mouth. They can share resources, and this is good for us also to be, I may say, confronted to our real user. The third reason is that social learning, of course, has a positive impact on the learner experience. Where people would otherwise be only learning from people in close proximity with them, anyone can now learn from anybody throughout the globe with just a simple click of a button. So it widens the sources of learning and the possibility to learn. And it's also more personal, more peer-to-peer. It personalizes the learning experience. The interactive aspect of social media is personal by nature, so the relationships one creates deeper and last longer than with any other media. So it creates connection, sense of belonging to a community, and I can give you a personal example. While I was starting my career, I was a kind of learning community manager, and I remember that I have facilitated a social media tools that were integrated in a training. And one of the participants had a baby at that time, and at the end he gave the baby my name, because at a distance we managed to create some personal links to work on the learning processes and how to deepen the learning techniques that, in fact, he had never lived that before in the training. And with other participants, I always see that participants even 10 years after. So when I say that the relationships are deeper and longer, I have lived that, and this is really true, because people are not blocked, in fact, by the physical presence. They are much more free to communicate and much more personal. And at the end, this is really good for self-confidence, because it encourages people to express, to share their opinion, and to argue their point of view. So in brief, I think it enhances their assertiveness. Of course, we have shy people, so this is the role of the learning community manager to help them take their voice in the social communication. And it's also good because it can valorize people's knowledge and ways of working, best practices. All that being said, I think it's no doubt that social learning enhances workplace learning. It can help on the 70-20-10. It can help before, during, and after training. So it supports the learning process at any moment. It also helps learners to get information on demand to do their job well. How employees access and use that information ultimately determines their effectiveness in the workplace. And organizations can create collaborative workplace where employees can learn from each other in a global environment instead of only learning in a formal setting or from the company expert. This way, they can also develop collaboration skills. So, as a conclusion, I would say that social learning is good for the organization as a whole. As a recent Gardner report states, today's workplace is diverse, distributed, and full of context shifts. Investing in collaborative practices is essential to productivity and competitive advantage. And social learning, in fact, expands connections and relationships within the overall business. It also encourages knowledge management since it enables to capitalize on key areas of knowledge and on best practices to improve courses and performance. For example, I know that a French company called Alstom use a video channel so that employees can share their best practices in video. It's totally bottom-up, and it helps the company to benefit from collective knowledge to do better in their practices. Social learning also enables a culture of continuous knowledge sharing, and it increases motivation and performance of employees. It creates a sense of belonging to a global community. And to illustrate this fifth point that social learning is good for the organization, I would like to share with you a recent reading of a study from McKinsey Global Institute that is entitled The Social Economy. And one of the main key findings was that using social media, employees can be 25% more productive than without using social media. So let's imagine, I did not make the study for learning, but let's imagine for a minute that the same idea was applicable to learning. Now, it's too early to assert, but if this is true, but we can keep this data in mind, and probably in some months we will be able to analyze if with social learning is more effective with concrete figures. So I'm sure a lot of you have a lot of experience in integrating social learning into their programs and with their LMS. So I would like to know what top tip would you suggest with the other, would you share with the others, and let's discuss for a minute about that, and then we will see what mine would look like.
Very good, Johanna. Thanks very much. I'm just watching the answers coming through. Jazz has asked, can we get a recording of the webinar? Yes, the recording will be available later on. It's a recording at the moment. And a couple of people asking about how you would include and integrate social learning with your LMS. And Johanna, you're going to, in subsequent slides, will you be looking at some of the things you did to make social learning work with the LMS at L'Oréal?
That, in fact, we were on the point of implementing an LMS with socialized function, but to be sure that we have to implement that, we run pilots with other tools, in fact, to make experience on what is social learning and how we can manage that into our technical systems, if I may say.
Okay, well, we'll discuss it in more detail later on. I don't want to interrupt the flow of your talk. Plenty of thoughts coming through about how people in the audience would include social learning in the organisation. Lots of different thoughts. Victoria Sturley, interestingly, saying that she'd start with new generations, new graduates coming in. And good integration, Stephen says, is hard to integrate social learning. So Well, some interesting points coming through and different points, some slightly sceptical that it might be possible. Sorry, Brian, if I'm too quiet. I'll put the receiver closer to my mouth. Okay. Johanna, back to you.
Okay, thank you. So I will share with you the 5 top tips I would suggest, and I can read, in fact, in the chat while speaking that the tips is aligned with what you think. Is that the first thing is to be learner-centric. So think about the participant first. Why would they share? How transparent is the process for them? How useful is it for them to improve their learning with social learning? So your social learning strategy must make sense for them. And that being said, I would say be progressive in your social learning strategy. That means make very little things at the beginning in the program and then complexify it during the program, but don't start with a complex social learning activity. For example, I think you can't imagine to make people start on collaborating prior to a classroom session because people don't know each other. So there is a progression, first individual learning and then work on collective learning, if I may say. And if you don't have a socialized LMS, don't worry, of course you can use other tools. We all know Ning and we can do a lot on Ning. We all know Yammer. We can do also a lot. But the key success factor is that you make it really simple in terms of access of login and password and in purposes for your learner. If it's a constellation, I may say, of social tools, at the end they don't understand really what is expected from them. So I think this is really important now as L&D to be learner-centric and think about our customer. Of course, we all want to design a really good program and test new possibilities, but the learner at the end is the key, so be focused on their experience. The second thing is to make it safe for your teams and for the company. So my recommendation is to, as I've done in my previous experience, is to work closely with IT teams to secure the bandwidth, the integration, the security, the data confidentiality, because this is one of the thing they are afraid of is the confidentiality of data. If you want to share practices, documents, you have to be sure that data will remain confidential. So sometimes that will ask you to select, in fact, which activity you will have to do on which tool, depending the level of security. So this is impacting your training design, this is impacting your instructional design, but you will have to do with it. And also, the second advice, what I had begun before I left my previous job, was to benefit from the communication team's advices regarding community management and public relation on social media. The brands, a lot of companies are working with social media to communicate with the consumer. So I think the learning and development team can really benefit from this experience and apply some best practices to the internal employees of the company. The third tip is, of course, to use the tool to answer the learning objective and address the constraints and not the country. To my opinion, the best way to fail is to incorporate social media tools in your training programs without deeply thinking of the learning goals you want to reach. Because in fact, the power of tools in general is that you can always use them in a different way than the one that was originally planned. So, for example, let's imagine you want your trainees to build a collective webography. Which would be the most accurate tool? A microblogging tool like Twitter, or a social bookmarking tool like Delicious? So first think about your learning objective and then select the tools, thinking about how you want the learner to make the work and to use the tool. You can, of course, use picture sharing tools to make a journal during field trips. That's what we did when I was working in the oil field, or to use this journal for on-the-job activities. You can also use microblogging tools to synthesize key learning, or wikis to co-construct reference documents. And you may also use blogging tools as the red thread of a training that lasts over several weeks, or as the learning journal for each participant, kind of a learning wall. And I will speak about that, but I really believe that this is important for people to realize how they are learning with social media. My key advice is to be careful not to overuse social media. For example, it can be appealing to make let's imagine, because social media can also be used within the classroom, and not only at a distance. So it can be appealing to make a wrap-up around a microblogging tool. I had a colleague that one day told me, okay, I will do my wrap-up in the classroom around Twitter, but what about the real social aspect of it? What is the most important, in fact, the collective list of key points through Twitter, or the live debate in a group around the paperboard? So the big question is how to leverage the usage of social tools without erasing the meaning of it, because sometimes we want to do social, and at the end this is not social at all. My fourth tip would be to, of course, to rethink the job of your learning managers to guide and motivate learners as a learning community manager that ensures productive learning. Some key responsibility would be managing content, publishing, curating, tagging, welcoming members. This is really important, and explain them the know-how and the know-who framework to facilitate their integration into the community, to create a supportive and encouraging environment by promoting, encouraging, and making constructive feedback, facilitating the constructive disagreement or conflict, monitor, measuring, reporting progress. Reporting progress is really important, making them understand the flow of the training, what has been achieved so far, what will come, to make them a recap of the intelligence they have created all together, and of course manage technological issues, tools, and learner experience. So, for example, one key point for the learning community manager that I have implemented in my previous experience is to encourage contribution. Pre-building blogs, wiki, nobody likes to enter an empty space. So you have to pre-build the resources. You have to encourage people to enter conversation, and not answering everything. You can sometimes ask for the advice or feedback of other participants, like in a classroom, because people have answers to other questions, and sometimes they are shy to share. So you have to ask people to help you, if I may say. And of course, you can also provide them with accurate resources, meaning sending extra links, moderating the resource they are sharing, YouTube is a big source of knowledge, but which resources is okay for the organization? Are the resources shared, aligned with the philosophy and the processes of the company? And of course, one of the roles of the learning community manager is to suggest experts to follow on Twitter, for example, some communities of practices to integrate on the social network of the company, and events and conferences to attend to go deeper in the learning process. And as a conclusion, what is also key in this new role for L&D professionals is to encourage reflections, provide accurate feedbacks, and support meta-learning, helping people think about their own learning process, giving them tips to learn effectively. Because indeed, how will you realize you are learning and the way you learn without anybody to help you thinking about it? So in that sense, your learning community manager can, for example, publish a digest at the end of each week, what has been done, what has been learned so far, what is coming the following week, etc. My last tip would be make it simple. Make it simple, as I said before, for people. Think about people, think about your customers' experience. Make it simple with tools. Do not multiply tools and back offices. Use smart technology to make it easier to collaborate and network. I've read in the chat at the beginning that sometimes it's much more complex to have a all-in-one tool. And I have tried that also, meaning interfacing a lot of tools, and at the end, of course, this is really difficult. So sometimes it's better to have 3 tools with different back offices, but in that case, you have to select them very carefully so that it's requested the minimum amount of work for your L&D teams, because, of course, their real added value is not working on back offices, but facilitating the learning process. Make it simple and carefully select which program to start with, depending on your objectives and your company culture. I've read people saying, okay, I would start with the Gen Y people of the company. Why not? If it fits with your company culture and your needs and your training objective. And that brings me to think about the change management strategy. In fact, why do you want to introduce social learning within your organization? What program do you want to impact, and how? How will you communicate on this? Train your internal teams? So these are questions you have to ask yourself before starting implementing social learning. And last, think about the top 10 KPIs that will enable you to evaluate the reach of your objectives. And that brings me to ask you the question, what metrics would you be choosing to evaluate the success of your social learning strategy?
Johanna, it's going really well. We're precipitating a lot of discussion in the text chat area, as you can see. I just wanted to say we have 10 minutes left, and there are some questions which we might want to pick up on. So let's not ask this question right now in terms of asking people to feedback on the metrics. Let's just go straight into what you think the metrics should be.
Okay.
I'm sorry, because it's great. I love the discussion, but I don't think we have time. Go ahead.
Okay. So way to measure, of course, proposing relevant content, matching learner expectation, improving your integration of social media, and the usage of tools by users. Sorry. 4 main questions to help you measuring the return on investment of your social learning. Who are the users? What do they consume? How many do you engage, and how do you reach them? So let's go a little deeper on that. So what to measure? So you have, I've written down some indicators for your global strategy and for the quality and relevance of each content. So the bounce rate is an internet marketing term. It represents the percentage of visitors who enter the site and leave the site rather than continue viewing other pages within the same site. And this is a really interesting figure to let you know if you manage to catch the attention of your learner. Referral traffic is not really easy to obtain, but it can help you increase the number of visitors to your social learning website. In fact, referral traffic is used to describe visitors to your site that come from direct links on other websites, such as intranet websites. Let's imagine you are promoting your video channel, learning video channel on your intranet, or posting some resources on the company social network. So I've put down some metrics that you could use to monitor your social learning strategy. So this is really number of connection, number of comments per post, number of likes, for example, on the resources. I've mentioned also the return on contribution, the ROC. That is the number of users versus the number of contributors. So in fact, this is a social ratio to measure social effectiveness. Do more people benefit than contribute? So you will have the full list of metrics, and also for each type of social media, if I may say, some metrics associated. So what we use for a blog, for a video channel, for a microblog, and for a network, for example. How can you get this metrics? Of course, you can have social monitoring tool integrated to your LMS or not. There are a lot of social monitoring tools on the market, but this is not the only sources for obtaining this data. You can also conduct some surveys towards learners, trainers, and managers, and of course, you can potentialize the development and performance review that you have within your companies. So the last thing is about ensuring managers and employees are clear about collaboration. And what I will say in this section is not specific to social learning, because it can be applied to online social networking as a whole. First, what I have encountered in my professional career is that management is often afraid of inappropriate comments. And a useful thing to have in mind is that it's much more difficult to engage people in a conversation than to control them, because people censor themselves. They prefer to like than to comment. So this is the traditional answer I do to management, because they are afraid of having some bad comments. Or the second things they are afraid of is depending the company culture. For example, within L'Oréal, there is a culture of internal competition between the various brands. And in that context, how can you share best practices, real cases and advices if my brand is in competition with the one of my colleagues? So I think it's really important to take into account the specificities of your company's culture, design a strategy for social learning. So what we have seen in the last minute is that learners are already familiarized with social media. Social learning enables HR to precisely and quickly evaluate the relevance of contents, trainings, curricula, and to improve them. Social learning already exists in an informal way, and it creates a sense of belonging to the company. So I think what is to be noted is first the evolution of the learning job with the emergence of a new role, the role of the learning community manager, and second, the new generation of LMS is coming to the market. I think you all know that. You have seen that every LMS vendor is integrated social components, but this is not this is, of course, a facilitator to do social learning within your company, but you can also use other tools on the market and complement, make an addition to the existing tools in your company. One of the questions for the future is, in the age of the big data, that is becoming a nightmare for all, because it's great to have a lot of data, but how can you take benefits of all that? How to make sure they are all relevant, up to date, and correct. So as a conclusion, I would say that L&D organization must look at all approaches to learning as complementary and interconnected. That being said, there is no opposition between social learning and LMS, because in fact social learning will fit with the new generation of LMS coming to the market. And now, in fact, there is no technical excuses for not doing social learning. It's there, and it shall be part of the learning mix. So this is my conclusion for this webinar. This will not clash, and we'll have to be creative and to integrate social learning really deeply into our training program.
Thank you very much, Johanna. Really super presentation, plenty of stuff in there. We have 2 minutes left, unfortunately, for questions and answers, which isn't actually enough. Discussion going on about tin can at the moment. Of course, I'll tell you in a second about what's happening at the conference in January about tin can. Adidas Group say, brilliant talk. Thank you so much. Yes, it was a brilliant talk. Thank you very much, Johanna. Thank you very much, everybody, for contributing. Excellent to see this combination of the view of social learning and how formal learning can sit together. Now, Maria van Vlodrop, who is also on the call at the moment, is from CertPoint Systems, and is, without going into too much detail, CertPoint Systems is the LMS systems that was deployed at L'Oréal. And if people are interested in knowing more about what's going on there, it would be quite, I just want to get to Maria's exact quote on that, that you can contact Maria to ask for some screenshots of what it might look like in order to work with an integrated LMS and collaboration. So if you'd like to know more, please contact Maria. Maria, if you're there, could you drop your email into the text chat area? Adidas Group says, can we exchange all our contact data? Well, we've got 98 people online. Not easily, but of course. What you can do is go to the website, and I'll tell you how to do that in just a second. But that is Johanna Sadoudi's contact information, very important. Got a company in Paris called vitamines.fr, and I'll just drop her stuff into the text area as well, so that you've got it to hand. There we go. That is how you get hold of Johanna. Please don't start dropping your emails into the text chat area, because it will make it absolutely impossible for people. Well, sorry, do it if you want to, of course. We're an open society, so please, no, go ahead, drop it in if you want to, and share your thoughts. I was just going to say, there's probably an easier way of sharing all the information we've got. It's going to get very unwieldy. No, please share your Twitters and your LinkedIns and everything. I'm going to wrap up now. I want to just quickly say some of the questions that came up which we couldn't handle were characteristic question, Jane Brochi. What about pull, push? It's not quite as black and white. You certainly can do some pull with LMSs, and in fact I know at L'Oréal they've done some great work with assignments being pulled up and information being shared up into the LMS by users. Quality control, Paul Birchall was very concerned about that, so was John Curran, and I think that's a legitimate concern. What about the 99.1 rule? Henry Fuller wanted to know about user types. Isn't it better not to force them but to enable them? And so on. There were plenty of questions which we couldn't handle, but there was so much stuff there. Jane Brochi says, can't we just share all our information on the Ning? We can, Jane. Thank you for that. Let me take you to the Ning, which sounds like a slightly strange thing to say. Over to the Ning we go. There we are. If you enjoyed the session, please let the world know about it on #LSG webinar on Twitter. Certainly that is where to share your thoughts about this. to share your thoughts about this overall topic, and indeed to get in touch with other people, you can reach 5,300 other people through the Learning and Skills Group, and that is www.learningandskillsgroup.com. We'll take you to the Ning site. It's free. Sign up. That thing with the red circle around it, or red ellipse around it, is the webinar archive. And if you go there, you'll find at some point next week the recording and the chat for this. What's a Ning? Asks John Moore. Ning is, sorry about that, I'm using shorthand. Ning is a provider of social media software. It's a platform. And now somebody's calling me on my line. Excuse me. I know what this is. This is the hotel telling me it's time to check out.